about you, but we're angry. We've had enough of this farcical issue of swine flu, whipped up by the newspapers, the televisions. There's been less people this year die of any kind of flu than any other year in the history of Australia. So what are they on about? Even with the fear that they wanted to put into the minds of the people that there was a terrible swine flu. And they're still running the ads, spending your money, taxpayers' money, for these ridiculous advertisements on a farcical swine flu so-called pandemic. There is no pandemic and they know it. And it's failing here in Australia. And it's going to fail too, because we will not buckle under the crime syndicate of the New World Order, Wealth Organisation, United Nations, NATO, CFR. These people have gone too far. This country is not America, and we're not so easily duped. Fear is the key that these New World Order, World Health Organisation, NATO, UN criminal cartel use. They will hope to get the majority to come to the clinic voluntarily. And if that doesn't happen, then they're going to round up people. But if the majority of the people, in the tens of thousands and the millions, don't go to the clinics to get their vaccination, they won't be able to handle it, and it will fail. It will fail as it did in 1976. But we've got a message to the media, and this is our message to you in the media. Whether you're the chief of staff, the manager, or the head reporters, we've got a message for you. You need to realise that you need to keep your job, but let's say something. This is Australia, and you are an Australian citizen, and you have a right to look after the people here that look after you. There's no way in the wide world you can continue to hide the criminal activities of your bosses, Reuters, Associated Press, handing down to you, whipping up frenzy and fear in people with headlines that are nothing more than criminal propaganda. Don't you realise, you in the media, you will not escape. You will not escape being a victim. This criminal cartel will cause you, your family, and your children the same harm that they have in this planned genocide and planned mass murder for every country in the world. So let's face it, media, knuckle down, be a proper Aussie, do your job properly and let the people know what's going on. Now there's one more thing, the reason why we're telling you that it will fail in this country and other countries. Already, do your research, you have a look on the net now, you'll find that the police in many countries are now saying no, they won't take the vaccination. Nurses and doctors in many countries are now saying, you won't give us the needle, we won't take it. Public servants in countries are now saying, you won't give us the needle, we won't take it. And you know what? There are people in the media now in other countries who are walking out on their job because they will not be dictated to with lies and propaganda from the New World Order, the CFR, Reuters and Associated Press. And these people that are working in the media overseas are already saying, we will not take the vaccination needle. What about you blokes here in Australia? Are you going to line up for a vaccination that you know is going to kill you? Your children are going to die from it. Now this is an interview with JANE Burgermeister, who has laid the criminal charges against Barack Obama, against Margaret Chan, the Director General of the World Health Organization, against Napolitano, against Spurious, against NWO. All of these people are now implicated in this mass murder. And here is JANE Burgermeister to tell you what she thinks will going to happen.
To us, and I said, look, you're not going to have a policeman with a gun knocking on your door accompanied by a doctor with a syringe. They haven't got the resources to do that. How actually could they enforce it if they wanted to? How could it happen? What would be the sanctions which they have?
Well, the French government released or circulated to the heads of departments an internal document of 19 pages which outline quite clearly their method. And this is what I assume is happening in every country. They're going to set up vaccine centres that are outside hospitals and GPs. Some of these are going to be secure. People are going to be told to go there first of their own free will, and then they're going to receive calls, whatever, telling them to appear at a certain time. And those people who do not come are going to eventually be collected and forced to go there.
Do the resources exist to actually do that? Because you're talking about transporting and enforcing and rounding up and making contact with hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, absolutely. If so many people refuse, it will be impossible. But they are assuming that the vast majority of people will either go of their free will, or when they get the call from, say, a police authority telling them to appear, or the notification, they will go reluctantly, but they will still obey that call. And the number of people who will actually refuse to go and stay at home when they're informed it's a criminal offence not to go will be very small, and it will be a criminal offence not to go. However, if it turns out that hundreds of thousands and millions refuse to go, then they cannot carry it through. And that's why it's important for every single person to say no and not to go along.
One that you truly do. What, may I ask, Jane, was your response when you realised that you had an opportunity to basically to give a message to the world on camera, which is what I want to support you in being able to do?
Well, thank you, Bill, for, as I say, taking the trouble to come all the way here. And it's a bit off the beaten track here in Vienna. It is, however, a significant place, as it turns out. It is the place where Baxter contaminated 72 kilos of vaccine material with the live bird flu, and so nearly triggered a global pandemic just a few months ago in February. This attempt to trigger a pandemic failed because of the alertness of people in the Czech Republic who detected it in a laboratory in biotest. However, it has now turned out that Baxter still has at least a large amount of that 72 kilos of bird flu, and we're coming to a point where we have only perhaps a few weeks until the government here in Austria and other governments around the world intend to start injecting people with so-called swine flu vaccine material, which we have every reason to fear is going to be a big hazard to our health, and has been designed to be a hazard to our health, even if it isn't contaminated with the live bird flu virus, as it might well be. So my message that I want to give to people, if I can give any message, is that time is running short, that we all of us now have to recognize the scale of the threat and danger to us individually and collectively, and we need to take steps and organize to stop this mass vaccination program as soon as possible.
And as we were discussing when we were just chatting before we started this video interview, you feel a tremendous sense of urgency, don't you? This is driving you right now.
Well, unfortunately, we have seen how, in spite of mounting and growing protests in the USA and now in Europe, the latest polls show that 29% of the Germans are categorically going to refuse the swine flu vaccine. In spite of all that, the governments are pressing ahead relentlessly. WHO is pushing with tremendous determination this unwanted, unnecessary and dangerous program on us, and it's coming in just a few weeks.
What's interesting to me is that we, like you, get reports from all over the world, and it seems that governments in every first world nation, and maybe other nations too, seem to be preparing in almost like marching in step with this thing. This is coordinated, isn't it?
Absolutely, and if you look at the legal framework, they are all following the same legal framework, and it's the International Health Regulations of 2005, which give WHO, the World Health Organization based in Geneva, the power to control how governments respond to this pandemic, which WHO has itself declared. And every country has a more or less identical pandemic plan, which hands power over to the World Health Organization, which allows the World Health Organization to take over the police and health forces. And every country will set up a crisis committee which will determine, what vaccine centres are established, what groups are going to be targeted for vaccination, and so on. And that is the reason why it's so coordinated and synchronized, because there is a single body behind it, and this is the World Health Organization, the UN, and the people who back that, the banking cartel and family dynasty, the Rockefellers and the Rothschild.
This is Jane Burgermeister's website called theflucase.com. Now go to part 2 of New World Order Has Australia in Their Pocket, and I'll show you who the Joint Standing Committee is on the treaties from overseas, and who are the people that sold us out. Who sold Australia out? I'm going to show you who they are.